Cataclysm myths, such as the Great Floods or apocalyptic destructions that I've discussed previously in the Ancient Cataclysms video, appear in cultures worldwide, leading scholars to ask if they reflect real, cyclical processes in nature and human society. Recent research in archaeology, psychology, and even physics offers insight into how ancient catastrophe narratives might correspond with natural cycles and how human cognition and culture evolved in response to massive disasters. In today's video, I'm going to summarize the key findings and debates across these fields, highlighting evidence of recurring cataclysms, the psychological impact of collective trauma, and theoretical models of cyclical destruction and renewal in the cosmos. Ancient civilizations often recorded or mythologized disasters like floods, earthquakes, and volcanoes, and modern archaeology finds many such events did occur. Geoarchaeological studies show that short-term cataclysms left marks on human settlements and folklore. For example, a 2019 overview by Litritz notes that catastrophic events such as floods, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, and the collapse of ancient cultures are allied to the births of myths and legends, and are the subject of long-lasting debate. The authors argue that both geological records and human history reveal a non-linear, quasi-periodic pattern to these disasters' impact on cultural evolution. In other words, natural upheavals, sometimes driven by astronomy like meteor impacts or climate shifts, have repeatedly reshaped the Earth's surface and human societies in a cyclical manner. Ancient myths of deluges and fallen skies are seen as cultural memories of real events. Several case studies bolster the idea that myth can preserve history. One striking example that we discussed in our previous video is China's Great Flood legend, the Flood of Ganyu. For millennia, it was told as a myth of a deluge tamed by Emperor Yu, but recent geological evidence suggests that it was real. A 2016 science study found that around 1920 BCE, a massive landslide dam break on the Yellow River caused an enormous flood, coinciding with a period of social upheaval. This aligns with the legendary timeline. Even details like the flood lasting years, which matches how long it would take for waters to recede. As one commentator noted, the finding supports the historical basis for traditional tales about China's Great Flood. Likewise, in the Mediterranean, the Minoan civilization's collapse after the Theran volcano is often linked to Plato's Atlantis myth. While the debate continues, it's noticeable that Plato's story of a wealthy island kingdom destroyed by floods and quakes closely follows the fate of Santorini and Crete. And if geology has anything to say about it, we might just see it all blow up again. In Mesopotamia, layers of flood sediment at sites like have been tentatively correlated with the flood in the Epic of Gilgamesh. These examples suggest ancient peoples encoded environmental catastrophes into narrative, preserving a memory of cyclic natural calamities. Beyond singular events, archaeologists and earth scientists have explored patterns of recurring climate disasters that hit multiple civilizations. For instance, evidence shows a severe drought around 2200 BCE, the 4.2 kiloyear event, coincided with the fall of Egypt's Old Kingdom and Akkadian Empire, a possible cycle of climate-driven collapse. A later cluster of disasters around 1200 BCE, earthquakes, droughts, and invasions, led to the late Bronze Age collapse. Some researchers propose that such events are not random. Periodic solar cycles, volcanic clusters, or even cosmic impacts might impose a rhythm on global catastrophes. The controversial Younger Dryas impact hypothesis is one attempt to link mythology and cosmic cycles. It posits that around 12,800 years ago, a comet exploded over the Ice Age Earth, causing sudden cooling and floods. Proponents like Bruce Mancy and others have noted that dozens of global flood myths could recall this event. Graham Hancock, for example, argues that a cosmic disaster 12,000 years ago nearly ended a lost Ice Age civilization and survives in myths of a great flood and fall from a golden age. However, this view does remain highly debated, and most geologists reject the Younger Dryas comet theory as lacking consistent evidence. The broader idea of cyclical cataclysms influencing human history has long been in tension with gradualist models of change. Today, mainstream archaeology accepts that natural disasters played a key role in past societal changes, but researchers still debate on how regular or predictable these events were. Emerging disciplines like geomythology bridge the gap, treating ancient myths as data that, alongside geology, can reveal a history of repeated cataclysms. Catastrophic upheavals don't leave only physical traces. They imprint on the human mind and collective memory. Psychological and anthropological research suggests that myths of cataclysm often arise as a response to trauma, helping communities make sense of the chaos. Extreme environmental or social stress can shatter a society's normal worldview, creating a need for new narratives and cognitive frameworks. Sociologist Kai Erikson coined the term collective trauma for disasters that damage the bonds attaching people together and impair the prevailing sense of community. When a culture's sense of reality is ruptured, myths and shared stories become crucial tools for healing and adaptation. Studies of collective trauma and folklore have documented how disaster narratives evolve. Mary DeYoung observes that cultural stories, myths, and legends that have as themes the mastery of past events and collective trauma can be used by communities as psychological resource during current crises. In other words, a group facing existential stress might draw hope from an ancient tale of surviving a great flood or cosmic winter, or people in a society might come up with conspiracy theories to comfort them and give the world a general sense of order and a seeming sense of control. Intriguingly, communities may invent new myths in the wake of trauma. After the Titanic sank in 1912, African-American storytellers, though not directly affected by the maritime disaster, crafted a folktale about a black stoker named Shine who survives the shipwreck when all wealthy whites perish. This invented myth serves as an allegory of resilience and triumph in the face of prejudice during an era of chronic racial trauma. Such examples show how human cognition uses narrative to regain a sense of control and meaning after cataclysmic events. On a cognitive level, trauma can include profound shifts in consciousness and belief. Psychologists note that people who live through disasters often report a change in values, worldview, and identity, sometimes described as post-traumatic growth or spiritual awakening. If we scale this up to whole societies, it suggests that eras of catastrophe might spur cultural or religious transformations. The apocalyptic visions that emerge after plagues or wars, like the medieval Europeans' obsession with the end times after the Black Death, can be seen as cognitive adaptations to restore order in a shattered world. Some scholars even propose that human consciousness itself evolved through a kind of catastrophic learning process. In a famous and controversial theory, psychologist Julian Jaynes argued that ancient humans originally had a bicameral mind, hearing guiding voices of the gods, which broke down under civilizational crises around 1200 BCE, forcing the development of modern self-aware consciousness. While Jaynes' hypothesis remains speculative, it underscores a provocative idea. Extreme stress may trigger new mental capacities. More concretely, modern neuroscience research finds that chronic trauma can rewire neural pathways for better or worse, affecting memory, perception, and creativity. Myths may encode those cognitive shifts. For instance, flood myths often end with a renewal of humanity in a new covenant or a fresh start, reflecting psychological rebirth after collective near annihilation. The destruction renewal motif found in myths worldwide might thus mirror a fundamental cycle in human psychology: collapse, then reorientation, and growth. Importantly, psychologists studying disaster survivors emphasize that narrative and culture are double-edged swords. A strong cultural framework can buffer individuals from some trauma effects, but if an event is entirely outside the existing cultural script, it can cause meaning rupture. DeYoung notes that collective trauma is a direct assault on continuity and integrity of the cultural system, and can leave people demoralized, confused, and powerless. In those cases, societies may undergo a paradigm shift, generating new myths, rituals, or even deities to explain and overcome the catastrophe. The dynamic may explain why so many cultures have legends of prior age that ended in disaster. These stories could be remnants of real cognitive and social revolutions our ancestors experienced under duress. The field of trauma studies and narrative psychology is actively exploring how memory of disasters is transmitted across generations, and how that shapes fundamental concept of reality, time, fate, and the role of the divine. While much remains to be learned, it's clear that at the collective level, myth-making is a coping mechanism that helps humans cognitively metabolize cataclysms. Moving from human history to the nature of reality itself, one finds intriguing parallels between ancient cyclical myths and modern scientific theories. In physics and cosmology, researchers have proposed that destruction and creation might be cyclical at cosmic scales, echoing themes of death and rebirth found in mythologies. Although quantum mechanics and mythology operate in different domains, some theoretical models in physics curiously align with age-old narratives of cyclical cataclysms. One prominent example is Sir Roger Penrose's theory of conformal cyclical cosmology, or CCC. Penrose argues that the Big Bang wasn't a unique one-off origin of the universe, but rather the universe goes through endless aeons in a cycle. In this model, our current universe began after the death of a previous universe, and in turn, the extremely distant future of our universe will blend into the next Big Bang. Penrose and colleagues even claim to see evidence of this cycle, anomalous hotspots in the cosmic microwave background that could be signals from black holes that exploded in a prior aeon. If CCC is correct, our universe is just one stage in a potentially infinite cycle of cosmic extinction and rebirth. Notably, Penrose himself has drawn parallels to ancient ideas, acknowledging that an eternal cyclical universe is a bit more like older cosmologies than the standard Big Bang paradigm. In fact, cosmologist Novella and Perez Brigliafa observed that modern cosmologies divide between a one-time creation event versus an eternal cyclical universe somehow parallels that of the cosmogonic myths in various cultures. Many ancient traditions, from Hinduism's endless kalapas to the Babylonian and Egyptian belief in recurring worlds, imagined as a time-infinite series of universes being born, destroyed, and reborn. Today's cyclical universe theories, such as CCC or the Big Bounce in loop quantum cosmology, revisit those concepts with mathematics. For example, loop quantum gravity calculations suggest that the Big Bang may have been a bounce that followed the collapse from a previous universe, avoiding an ultimate singularity. These ideas remain speculative and are met with some skepticism by scientists, but they represent a serious attempt to incorporate cyclical regeneration into fundamental physics, much as myths have done symbolically. Even at the smallest scales of nature, quantum theory involves constant creation and annihilation, a sort of continuous flicker of existence that resonates with the cycles of destruction and renewal. Quantum field theory tells us that empty space truly isn't empty. It's seized with virtual particles that spontaneously pop in and out of existence. As one physics synopsis describes, quantum fluctuations that pervade empty space spontaneously give birth to pairs of particles and antiparticles, which usually annihilate so promptly that they remain virtual. In a stable vacuum, all pairs that are created are also destroyed almost immediately. An eerie microcosm of the create-destroy cycle. This phenomenon, confirmed by effects like the Casimir force, shows that at a fundamental level, nature is dynamic and cyclical. Some physicists have potentially linked to a quantum foam, where universes or particles bubble into being and dissolve. While this isn't a literal cataclysm, it illustrates that oscillating processes are embedded into reality. The stability that we observe is the balance of countless tiny births and deaths of particles at each moment. The frontier where quantum mechanics meets consciousness has provided a path that ties these concepts together. For instance, physicist Fritjof Capra famously compared the dance of subatomic particles to Shiva's cosmic dance in Hindu mythology, a rhythm of creation and destruction, akin to the pulse of the universe. Some quantum consciousness theories suggest that consciousness moments arise from orchestrated collapses of quantum states in the brain, potentially at a 40 Hz cycle, 40 collapses per second. If true, one could say that the mind itself operates by sequence of tiny quantum cataclysms. The oscillatory view of consciousness Periods of stability interrupted by sudden insights or phase transitions is another area being explored in cognitive science, hinting that nonlinear jumps, somewhat like creative destruction, might underlie cognitive evolution as well. Moving from cyclical patterns in cosmology and quantum physics into the realm of consciousness, intriguing parallels emerge with persistent flood myths and other enduring archetypal narratives. Physicist and inventor Federico Fagan posits that consciousness may be fundamental rather than emergent, suggesting a deeper quantum foundation to the human psyche and its archetypal imagery. Similarly, Maria Friends, through artistic and philosophical exploration, underscores how ancient narratives might express subconscious experiences rooted in a universal quantum-informed consciousness, accessible to all humans across generations. Philosophers such as Alan Watts and ethnobotanist Terence McKenna have famously highlighted how ancient myths could encode deep experiential truths, possibly arising from quantum-like states of consciousness induced through meditation, ritual, or psychedelics. Watts described myths as humanity's intuitive grasps of reality's fluid, interconnected nature, paralleling quantum entanglement and wave-particle physics. McKenna expands on this by suggesting that altered states reveal hidden dimensions of consciousness, perhaps explaining the recurrent motifs of destruction and rebirth across diverse cultures. Further elaborating on this concept, contemporary researchers in quantum cognition propose that our brains might operate with quantum-like mechanisms, thereby influencing how we create and sustain collective myths and archetypes. This perspective aligns with the auric-aura theory advanced by Roger Penrose and Stuart Hamerhoff, which posits that consciousness emerges from quantum processes within neuronal microtubules, involving orchestrated objective reduction events at fundamental levels of reality. Such quantum processes could theoretically account for humanity's shared subconscious imagery and symbolic frameworks, transcending cultural and temporal barriers. Carl Jung's theory of the collective unconscious similarly describes universal motifs as inherent aspects of human cognition, further suggesting a potential quantum underpinning for these archetypes. Integrating quantum mechanics with psychology and anthropology, scholars increasingly view myths not merely as cultural artifacts, but as expressions of fundamental quantum realities deeply embedded within our conscious experience. This quantum interpretation may thus provide insight into why archetypal narratives such as flood myths repeatedly manifest throughout human history, resonating across civilizations separated by vast expanses of time and geography. Scholars from different fields are increasingly aware that global cataclysms, whether natural or man-made, are a key driver of change, biologically, culturally, and even in planetary systems. The study of past mass extinctions, 5 major ones in our own history here on Earth, shows how life has been periodically nearly wiped out and then flourished anew, suggesting that evolution itself proceeds in leaps after catastrophe. Some theorists propose that this applies to social evolution too, like the rise of new religions or ideologies that often follow times of calamity. Interdisciplinary conferences on themes like cosmic catastrophe in the human history or myth and geology have brought together geologists, historians, folklorists, and physicists to share insights. A notable trend is geomythology, pioneered by Dorothy Vitellano and expanded by Picardi and Massey, which treats myths as preserving data about real geological events. Concurrently, the field of disaster anthropology looks at how cultures adapt to recurring natural hazards, finding patterns in human response. In the realm of physics and philosophy, dialogues on the nature of time and reality, such as the contrast between linear time and cyclical time, often invoke metaphors from myth to illustrate scientific models. In summary, cataclysm myths can be viewed as a window into fundamental universal process, the cycle of rupture and renewal. Archaeology provides evidence that many myths were not pure imagination, but grounded in real events, sometimes events so traumatic that they were recorded in collective memory for thousands of years. Psychology shows that these narratives serve a vital role in helping humans cognitively process and recover from disasters, potentially leading to shifts in consciousness and culture. And quantum physics and cosmology, in their own abstract way, increasingly point to a universe where endings and beginnings are intertwined. From virtual particles winking in and out of existence to universes that might regenerate cyclically across cosmic time. This convergence of perspectives does not prove a grand theory of everything, but it highlights a resilient motif in human understanding. From great chaos comes rebirth. As research continues, you may better grasp what this motif is. This convergence of perspectives does not prove a grand theory of everything, but it does highlight a resilient motif in human understanding. From great chaos comes rebirth. As research continues, we may better grasp whether this motif is simply how our minds cope, or if it does indeed reflect cyclical patterns built into the fabric of reality. That's all for today, so please like and subscribe and check out all the scholarly references that made this video possible in the bibliography in the channel bio. And I'll see you next time!